How's everybody doing today, huh? You can see I am not in my normal setting. This Sunday, oh, that's not Sunday yet, is it? This Saturday, I happen to be in a rental house at the beach on the Central California coast. And, yep, it's getting a little feedback. Okay, so I have Frank with me again today, and he's going to come on in just a minute. We're going to talk more about our knit along that we're going to do together. But first, I want to welcome you all to my live stream. This is June 12th, 2021, and I'm open to just general questions today. I'm going to answer some more questions about the iTag Sis. I have Frank Jernigan on here with me from franco.com, and we're going to be talking about our upcoming knit along and how you can get started on that and other assorted things, whatever we feel like talking about today. If you're a returning person, thank you for returning and coming to my live stream. If you're brand new, go ahead and say hi in the chat and let us know that you're new because everybody will say hi back to you. We're a pretty friendly groupie here. And let me see who's here today. We've got already just bunches and bunches of people here. Sherry Cornick. And she has a question, but I'll come back to it, Sherry, in a minute after I welcome everybody else, okay? Joan Miller is from Kansas City, Missouri. Elizabeth Nielsen from Sweden. Jessie P. from Billings, Montana. Elizabeth Mulhall from Dublin, Ireland. Dolise Beeman from Washington. Francoise from Lyon, France. Manu Rimbaud from London. Dolise, people are chit-chatting. Belinda Drabble from England. Judy from British Columbia, Vancouver. Marie Tobita from New York City. 37 Vega Lira from California. I think that's Sue. Trevster from Spain. Sheila Orienter from Connecticut. Judith Andres from Southeast Michigan. Sandy H. from Maryland, Diana Danko from Pennsylvania, Rona Shane from Southern California, Kat B. from Northern California, Marlene Karen from Michigan, Judy Snyder from San Joaquin Valley. I think she's from where I live in Bakersfield. Carolyn Finnermans from Central Oregon, Jeanette Boland from North Carolina, Fatima from Portugal, Carol Butler from, oops, I don't know where she's from, but she's here live. She usually has to watch the replay, so she made it live. Yay. Vera Hunt from Meridian, Idaho, Alma Rose, Jane Hart, Debbie Newland from Bakersfield, Kelly Mycat, and so on and so forth. Welcome, everyone. Before we go any further, I know I've thanked my volunteers many times before, but I cannot thank them enough. It truly takes a guild, and that's why I call my tutorials, it takes a guild to do this production that I do. Dolise Beeman is the moderator, administrator for my Ravelry group. Margot Shin is the administrator for my Facebook group. Diana Danko does the live stream timestamps for me every week. Francoise Monroe from France does my translations into French. Her husband does many of the drawings for me. I do them freehand on paper and he translates them into these gorgeous drawings for me. Fatima Dehan translates into Portuguese. Teresa Roman translates into French. Demetria Yui is just an overall help in making sure that my directions make sense, that knitters can understand them, and is a great proofreader. And then I have all the people in my boot camp classes that help me. I have Renee Petrowski, Jackie Rickles, Judy Joyce, who are my co-administrators for my boot camp classes, my live Zoom classes, and then my daughter-in-law, Janine. All these people help me, and I could not do all of the things that I do without their assistance. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I love all of you. And then there's all of you that participate in the knit-alongs. It's so fun to see your work. It's so heartwarming. So let's move forward. Let me get Frank on here. Here's Frank. Hello, Frank.
Hello, everyone.
So we're so excited to do this new knit along. And so today, I've asked Frank to kind of walk you through how to use his site, franco.com, and how to begin setting up your, to sign into the site, create your own account, and how to begin setting up a pattern for yourself. So I'm handing it over to you, Frank, okay?
Okay. It's really great to be here again, and I'm excited about doing this knit along with you, Suzanne. This is really wonderful. I think well, we like each other a lot, and so we also work together well, and this was just going to be really fun.
I think it's going to be a blast.
So let me uh, show you the website and see if I could walk you through getting started with the website. So if I can share my screen with you. Here we go. The first thing to get right is the spelling of the name Franco. It's a very odd spelling, and I think if you don't write it down, you will guess and guess and never guess how I spelled it. It's Phrantco. The C is important. A lot of people leave that out. A lot of people say Francko. I mean, so it's like you get all sorts of variations, but the only one that works is Phrantco.com. And when you go to that page, this is what you see. This is the home page. And if you want to learn more about what the website, the sweater pattern that you will create here, there's all these questions. What kind of sweater is it? How difficult is it? Why is it a perfect fit? Why would you want to make a plain sweater? Well, I think this knit along is going to show you why a plain sweater is really just a palette for modifying however you want. So that's the answer to that, and then a little bit about who I am. Then there's also this video in the middle of the page, right below the welcome screen. And that video is a walkthrough of the entire website, showing you how to do every page. So if you don't remember something here, you can just click that video and find it there, and maybe I will answer whatever question you have later. We will also see that video one other place, and I'll tell you where to get it. But let's say you're ready to get started and you don't have an account yet. So the account costs nothing to set up. In fact, everything is free until you decide to buy a pattern that you've purchased, that you have created. The idea, as I said last week, is to create a custom fit sweater pattern that uses a special technique for doing set-in sleeve architecture from the top down and doing most of the sweater completely in the round, all the way up to the neckline. So you begin, of course, by clicking this link that says login/sign up. And that takes you to a login page where you will go most often after you have created an account. But in order to create an account, it says, as it says, log into your account. If you have not created an account yet, then please sign up first. So you would click the sign up link, and that takes you to create a new account. You don't ever need to come back here once you've created it. You can only have one account per email address. You can't use the same email address twice. So let me also point out one other thing on the login page. At the bottom, it says, have you forgotten your login name or your password? And well, you've got to remember your email address that you logged in with. But you would click there and fill out a form with your email address, and it would send you a link to reset your password. So That was a recent enhancement of the website. I used to have to ask people to email me when they forgot their password so I could tell them what it was, because I had to look it up in the database or actually give them the ability to reset it. So anyway, you don't have to do that anymore. So to create an account, you enter your email address, you choose a username. I think I have accounts under the name Frank and Franco. You have a password, and then you copy the password. I mean, you type the password again to make sure you copied it, wrote it the same way twice, and then you click sign up. Now, it just occurred to me that I don't have a way of doing this. I know what I have. The reason I don't have a way of doing it is I've used every email address I've got. So I do have one more email address that I will use. Let me use the username Franco and the password. Let's see if this will work for me, because I'd like you to be able to, oh, Franco already exists, of course, because I already have that. There. You have successfully signed in as Franco1. And so when you create your new account, this is the page you will see. And what this page is an invitation to sign up for my newsletter, which is already filled out for you with your email address and your password. And you just click subscribe and you'll get my monthly newsletter, which I hope is entertaining and informative. And then here is the same video that you saw on the home page. So you can always come back here and watch it, except coming back here, I have to explain. And then there's some instructions here about creating your sweater to get you started. Once you have created your first sweater pattern, you will no longer see this page when you log in. In order to see this page after that, you would click the help button in the top right corner. And when you click help there, you see basically the same page again. So this is how you can get back to see it and to view that video after you've logged in. Let's go back here where I just logged in. It wants to show, I clicked on the sweaters link to see this page. And normally the sweaters link will show you all of the patterns that you have created, whether you have purchased them or not. And I clicked the sweaters link, but since there are no sweaters, I show you the help page. So that's why you see this only until you find the first, until you create your first pattern. Now at the bottom of this page, you can see I want to create a new sweater. That's actually, I use the term sweater and pattern interchangeably. You're really creating a pattern. You're not creating a sweater, but we'll call the patterns sweaters. When you create your first sweater pattern, the first thing it asks you for is what yarn you're using. And there are two cases here. You've chosen your yarn and you've got the ball band and you have already knitted your swatch and you're ready to generate a pattern and then create the sweater. Others of you have not chosen the yarn or you have not knitted a swatch yet, and yet you can there's still value in going through this process even before that. And if you read all of that text on the help page, it explains what you can do. What you're doing is basically estimating the amount of yarn to purchase for your sweater. Since you have, I'm going to fill this. If you have a yarn band, of course, you would fill in all these things from the yarn band. And if you type the brand name and the yarn name, and it's something that somebody else has already entered, like Cascade Yarns, Cascade 220, and then go to the next field, someone else has already entered all that information. And so you get what the last person entered for that yarn. But I'm not going to do that now. I'm going to start over and say, well, I don't have the yarn yet, so I would like to just get past this screen. So all I'm going to do is enter something in this brand name, and I'm going to just say some red yarn. It doesn't matter what you put there. You can always come back and change it later. Now you need to put in the measurements of the person you're creating the sweater for. And that might be yourself, or it might be somebody else that you are creating the sweater for. So I'm going to create it for myself. I'll enter my measurements in inches, chest circumference, neck circumference, shoulder to waist. I think that's turned out to be about 27.5. Upper arm circumference is 15. No, let's make that 14. Circumference at wrist is 7, and underarm to wrist is 19. Those are the measurements you need to have from the person you're knitting for. Notice what's missing. You do not enter a waist circumference or hip circumference. And that's because my pattern does not produce body shaping. One of the things that Suzanne will cover in this series is how to add body shaping to this plain sweater pattern that's just straight. So that's exciting for me to see and participate with you all to learn. The other thing that's missing is the back width from shoulder to shoulder. And the reason you don't have that is because it's a very difficult measurement for people to enter. And if I let you enter it yourself, you might enter it at the width of your shoulders, and then you wouldn't be able to create a set-in sleeve because it's not set in. How far do you measure? Is it from the tops of the clavicle to the tops, or the outside or the inside, and different people might do it differently. And so the fit of the sweater really depends a lot on getting that measurement correctly. So what I do is I have an estimate of how wide the back is based on your chest circumference. Now notice that means it's a constant body chest circumference. That means you, as women, women who do this should take their upper chest measurement above the bust line, because that will be a more accurate measure of your actual skeletal fit, which is what the back is based on. And then if you are full busted and you have entered that measurement, you will have to do some adjustments of the pattern that Suzanne will show you how to do.
So when you're measuring your bust, I'm going to interrupt just for a second. When you're measuring the chest circumference, it would be directly under your armpits.
That's right. That is correct. So now I'm going to save recipient, and I'm now going to decide to put in some information about the sweater I want to make. The first thing I have to answer is what type of sweater do I want? Pictures of the various possibilities are showing right now. In fact, you can see the sweater that was just showing is the one I'm wearing, that one. There are 4 types. There is a crew neck, a saddle shoulder, a V-neck, and a Henley. This is the Henley. Let's just start with a simple crew neck. You have to say who it's for. Well, I only have one recipient that I've entered here. So I'm going to choose me as the recipient. The shoulder to waist measurement that I entered before could have been a shoulder to my belt line or a shoulder to your waistline. And then that may not be the length of the sweater you want. And so here is where you add inches to what you entered on the page before. This number gets added to the shoulder to waist measurement that you entered on the page before to determine the length of the sweater. Since I entered 27 on the page before, that is the actual length of a sweater I would knit. So I'm just going to put a 0 in here. I usually put cuff lengths of 2 and 2, but you can put anything you want. This colors field can be filled in any way you like. It's red, glowing yarn, whatever. And the sweater title is optional, but it's nice to give your sweater a title. So let's call it Frank's Delight. And you'll see that appears at the top of the pattern. Next, we enter our gauge measurements. You might not have chosen your yarn and knitted your gauge yet, but perhaps you know that you're going to knit a worsted weight yarn or a DK weight yarn. And in that case, you can go to the help page and I'll suggest measurements to put in for each weight. I believe for the worsted weight yarn, it's a count of 20 stitches over 4 inches and a row count of maybe 28 over 4 inches. And this is just an estimate. And I'll put in needle size 6. By the way, the needle size doesn't affect the pattern. It's just written in the materials of the pattern, the list of the pattern. But these measurements for the swatch are absolutely critical to get the fit that you want. So what you're doing here, if you have not knitted your swatch, is you're entering an estimate of what you think they might be. So you can then go all the way up to purchasing the pattern, but do not purchase it. On the last page before you purchase it, you will see a schematic, and I'll show you in a minute. Above the schematic is an estimate of the yardage that you will need. So it will help you know exactly how much to go to the yarn store and purchase to do a worsted weight sweater to those measurements. We click create. It then reflects back to you what you've entered. There was some red yarn, color red glowing yarn. Here are my measurements over here. And then down here are the selection of fits that you want. Now, one of the beauties of this pattern is that when you select larger fits, the things that don't change on your body from one size to the next for a different fit are not changed in the pattern. So your neck width doesn't change, your back width doesn't change, but your chest circumference does change if you want a looser fit, and your arm circumference changes if you want a looser fit. So some things change and some things don't. And so that gives this an advantage over choosing a looser fit by choosing a larger size in a published pattern, which would increase the size of the neck and the back as well. So you see the ease that's associated with each of these titles. The standard ease, arbitrarily, the standard ease is 2 inches. Some people list it as 4 inches, but you're choosing an ease anyway. I'll choose 2 eases. And and as you see, the cost is $6 for the first size and $2 for the second size and $1 for each additional size. I will go to checkout. I still have not purchased it. I've not paid anything. Here I'm presented with a schematic that shows everything that results from all of those fields that I've entered. 2 numbers, that's for the 2 different fits. Here is the 23 for the standard fit, which is 46, which is 2 inches over my 44 that I entered. Here is 24, which is 48 inches for a looser fit. That's 48, which is 4 inches more than I entered for my chest measurement. The arm measurement likewise has 2 sizes, and yet the back width has just 1 width. It's the same no matter whether you're knitting a loose sweater or a standard weight, standard size sweater. The neck width doesn't change. The arm length doesn't change. So you look at those. It's very important to look at all of those measurements and make sure they say exactly what you want to say. After you purchase it, we cannot go back and change them. Well, with the exception that I'm a nice guy, and if you tell me you made a mistake and you've already purchased it and you write me a nice email, I will go in behind the scenes and change it for you. I've done that before. I'll be happy to do it for you. But I'm asking you to be careful from the beginning, and so I don't get inundated with such requests as that. So you check the schematic. The schematic does not, the actual diagram does not change based on your measurements. It's a static picture. It always looks the same. What changes is the numbers that are written into it. It shows that I've chosen 2 sizes, standard and roomy, and that's $8 because it's $6 for the first size and $2 for each additional size. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Oh, so no, what we're going to do next is we're going to say, now I see I have to get 1,510 yards of worsted weight yarn to knit this sweater from me. So now I go to the store, I choose the worsted weight yarn that I'm interested in using, and I buy this number of skeins that gives me at least that many yards. The yardage is a little bit liberal, I would say. It should include enough for a 5 by 5 inch swatch plus your sweater and have a little bit left over. But if you have a friendly local yarn store will let you buy an extra skein, I would do that and take it back if you don't need it. So you have estimated that you need that many yards. You go to the store, you buy that many yards of yarn, you come back, you knit your swatch using the needles you choose to use. You might choose different needles to try it out in different drapes, and then you choose which needle size you want and create a swatch with that needle, those needles and that yarn, and take your measurements, and now it's time to go back and change them. So in all that time, you have probably logged out. So we're going to log back in and hope that I can remember how to do that. I think I chose the name Franco1, and I remember the password I used. And I'll click login, and there I am. And look, I don't see that help page anymore. I see the sweater patterns that I've created, which includes the one we just created. So again, if you really want to see the help page again, just click help at the top, and it's always there. So you can still see all of that information. I'm going to go back to the sweaters listing, and it's here. And so now I want to change some measurements, and I can change any of them that I want to change. I'm going to click edit. And then I see in this link in the above the flashing images, it says update Frank's measurements. If I decide that I really put in too large a neck or too large an arm, I can click that and go back and change any of the measurements I've put in for me. But I will not change anything I've done. But I will go down here and say, oh, I decided to use size 7 needles. And I actually was getting only 19 stitches for 4 inches and 26 stitches, rows per 4 inches. You don't have to say 4 inches. If you knit a swatch that, if you measure 5 inches, you can put the number of stitches over 5 and it will recalculate it for you to be the number over 4. I do not suggest you only knit 1 inch swatch and then put that in, because then your sweater won't fit. Suzanne probably can say a lot about how to do a swatch, and we'll be talking about swatching next week. So
Yeah.
we'll come back to that. All right, so now I put in the correct measurements. I know what kind of yarn I want. So I'm going to update the specifications, and then I'm going to edit the yarn. And now I did decide to use Cascade yarns, and I chose Cascade 220. And so all of that gets filled in. I'll look at those values, compare them to my yarn band. And if anything isn't right, like if this really wasn't 100% wool, it was really 100% superwash wool, then I would put that in. But I'm not going to put that now because that's not accurate for Cascade 220 that's not superwash. But you can change these fields even though they were filled in for you. So then you save the yarn. Now we have, what happened? It didn't save the yarn. Oh dear. Well, it's supposed to save the yarn and change it, and
It did. It just saved it as red glowing yarn, but it says Cascade 220.
oh, it does. Yes. Oh, that confused me. Okay. Yes, it did change the yarn. Thank you. So then I would go to checkout and enter your credit card and the payment here. And I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to log out and log into my regular account and show you when I do that, what a pattern looks like. So you would click that. Let's see what I have here. Here's a pattern I've done. The title would be here where I said Frank's Delight. It would be there where it says test entered measurements. And then it would say crew neck sweater for Frank, or for whoever you said the recipient was. And then it shows the sizes, that is the fits that you chose, whether it was tight, standard, roomy in this case. You see the same schematic again that we saw before, except this is not the sweater, the same sweater, so it's a little different, of course. And there's your materials list showing the and here's your stitch gauge that was calculated for you. And then it proceeds as any other pattern with notes and instructions on what to do. That is the pattern. The magic is right here in the sleeve cap shaping. I call it the magic because this is actually the part that was original with my algorithm. I created a way to make the sleeves bell-shaped. And so you do that by doing something typical. This is very typical of a pattern. They're not all like this, but you knit, you do an increase round every other row. Say if you're doing the standard, it would be the bold ones. So you would do every other row 4 times. Then you do an increase round every 3rd row, every 2 times, and every 5th row 3 times, every 3rd row 3 times, and every other row 3 times. And those numbers create a bell-shaped sleeve cap as you work down the sleeves in the round.
Very cool.
The rest of it is standard. And I also list, this is a new addition to the pattern. I list the measurements that you used to create this sweater because they're not all apparent in the pattern itself. And you may want to review, did I say my neck was 17 inches? It's really 16, well, yes, you entered 17 inches for your neck circumference. But notice the neck circumference doesn't show in the pattern. It's the neck width that's calculated from what you entered as neck circumference.
Excellent. So
I think that will get them started.
Yeah, there's a couple of
Yes,
questions.
question? Sure.
Sidra says, if gauge and stockinette stitch is different from the pattern mosaic stitch, which gauge do you decide to use?
If you're doing a pattern that is an all over pattern, if your entire sweater is in mosaic or Fair Isle or seed stitch or garter stitch, if it's an all over pattern, you swatch that pattern and enter those measurements from your gauge swatch.
And as Frank said a minute ago, next week, he and I are going to focus on swatching for this sweater and how you can actually mix different stitch patterns together, how you would calculate it, and stuff like that. We're going to have a whole session, maybe even 2 sessions focused on that, because aside from your personal measurements of the person you're going to knit the sweater for, the other most important information is the information you get from your gauge swatch. In order to get the sweater to fit properly, you need the proper measurements of the body and proper measurements of your gauge swatch. And Debbie Newland asked, is the gauge swatch done flat or in the round? And I knit mine, if I'm going to knit my garment in the round, I do my gauge swatch in the round. And for those of you who've taken my boot camp classes, you know that there can be quite a bit difference between the size of your knit stitches and your purl stitches. And when you knit stockinette back and forth, you have half purls, half knits, so everything evens out. But if you're knitting something in the round with just all knit stitches, the stitch gauge can be quite different from stockinette knit flat. So if you're knitting a project in the round, you need to swatch in the round. That's my opinion. I'll bet Frank agrees.
I absolutely agree, of course.
Yeah. Let's see if there's some more questions here. Let me put it on you and I. Let's see. Let's put both of us on here. Okay. So let's see. Let me go back to the top because there was questions. Sherry Corning, there might be some questions that aren't related to this, Frank, so we'll just go through go with it. Yeah. On the last bind off stitch, why pull the tail through the last stitch loop rather than just pulling the loop up? If you just pull the loop up and pull the yarn through, then you're really not fastening off the last stitch. And that's something, we'll come back to that in a minute because I'll put some yarn on my needles and we'll do that. And let's see, let me go down. Several people are interested in doing the colorwork scarf again. It sounds like that might be something I'd consider doing. The tutorial, let's see. I'm scrolling through. Lots of commenting today. That's cool. I love it. And it looks like there's several new people on here. The Tooth Fairy, greetings from Sweden. I think the Tooth Fairy is new. Let's see, I saw another new person on here. It's a lot of chit chat to go through. So Titus 2:11:15, you said you have a question. Let me see if I can find it. And Sally Yanita said, hi, I'm a bit late. Suzanne, a new room? No, I'm actually at the beach. This is a rental house, so I'm not in my own environment in my library at home right now. Let's see. There's just people on here from all over the world. It is so amazing. Kalpana from India. Yay, nice to see you again. Okay, Titus. I am making a chevron blanket with a CDD where I slip 2 stitches over a knit stitch. I'm getting loose gauge on the right side of the ridge, despite giving a little tug on the knit stitch. Help. I would suggest when you're doing the slipping the 2 stitches from the left needle to the right needle, you're slipping them together as one, like a knit 2 together. Do this on the tip of your left needle and right needle. Work on the tips of your needles so you're not stretching out the 2 slip stitches. Also, it decreases the amount of yarn between the previous stitches on the right needle and the 2 that you're slipping, so you don't have a big space there. And then work on the tips of your needle to pull the new stitch through, and then give it a little tug to tighten it up. Try that and see if that helps you. Let's see. Everybody liked your presentation, Frank.
Oh,
I thought it was
thank you.
really good. Question from Carol. Picking up stitches for a shawl, collar, cardigan collar. One side has 10 more stitches. Is it better to decrease or to increase to match? I've picked up the stitches 3 times and always get the same mismatch number of stitches. That's a lot. 10 stitches is a big difference between one side and another. Are you sure that you have the center back correct in the back neck? You may be having your center back over one side further than the other if you're picking up stitches all the way to the back. So double check that. Carol, if you're still having an issue with that, pictures help me a lot. You can post something over in my Facebook group, Knitting with Suzanne and Bryan. If you can show some pictures of what you're doing, I could help you better. And Sue McVicker says, this is the most helpful for gathering information from those far away we may want to knit for. Including the measurement data we entered is most helpful to reflect for repeat knits or to compare if there are changes. Catherine Burrows, Frank, this is for you. What is meant by a bell-shaped sleeve?
Oh, let me see if I can bring up a picture of that. It's a bell-shaped sleeve cap. I'm sorry if that wasn't clear. It's going to take, you can take another question while I bring up those, find those pictures again.
Fatima says, question, hi Frank, on the next project, I'd like to make a cardigan instead of another sweater. Is it easy to change? Yes, and that's something Frank and I can talk about after we do the swatching. Then we can talk about altering the pattern, like making a cardigan instead of a sweater. It should not be difficult to do, and we can talk about what you would need to look for in the written pattern and little changes that you can make to it, okay? I think it's totally doable. Inball Gross question, is it possible to make short sleeves with Frank's patterns? Yes, so where he asks you to put in your underarm length, you would put the length to wherever you want the sleeve to end. And where he asks for your wrist circumference, you would put your arm circumference at the point where you would like the sleeve to end. And then the pattern will spit out the instructions for making your sleeve any length you want.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay.
Let me share the screen so you can see some pictures. I shared these last week, but we'll take a look.
Yes, excellent.
So this is the traditional way of doing set-in sleeves. And so, it's knit flat front and back, and each sleeve is knitted flat. And this is the shape that that sleeve takes. And any set-in sleeve pattern you use that is using this technique will put in the necessary decreases if you're bottom up or increases if you're top down. Curve that is the top of the sleeve cap, or that is the sleeve cap at the top of the sleeve. Some of the approaches to knitting set-in sleeves do not create a bell-shaped cap. They create Bryan called the witch's hat shape. It was flat across the top, straight sides, straight down, and then flat across the bottom. You know, if you can picture a witch's hat, traditional witch's hat. I thought that was a clever description. And that simply doesn't fit as well as a true bell-shaped sleeve cap. So I'll skip this and talk about the technique for set-in sleeves that I do. As you see, you start at the top. It's a top-down design. You start at the top, you knit the sides of the neckline flat, and after that, everything is knitted in the round. You pick up the stitches at the end of each shoulder. And then from there on, you're knitting in the round. And so you're knitting the sleeve cap in the round all the way down. And so I have inserted just the properly calculated increases to make that sleeve cap be, if it was flattened out, which it never is, if it was flattened out, it would be a bell-shaped curve. And this is what that bell shape looks like on several different sizes for sleeve caps of various sweaters I've done. So you can see that they're truly bell-shaped and not just a witch's hat design.
Excellent.
Does that answer the question?
I think it does. So the
Here
difference
is,
is, let's go back to
okay,
that bell shapes. Go back a couple screens to the multicolored one.
okay,
So the difference is, see up
yeah,
here, it's wider. So you have the sleeve, top of the sleeve cap, and then it goes out and then comes in and comes down. So this gives you more room up at the upper portion of the sleeve cap to fit your, that's where your deltoid muscle is, okay? So that muscle expands out on either side of your arm, and this gives shape to it. Okay, any other questions? Oh, Sidra has a question. She's typing it. And Olga asked if we're going to be able to see this again, and it is being recorded and it will be saved on YouTube. You can see it on my YouTube channel anytime you want. And because Diana Danko does the timestamps, you'll be able to click right to the place you want to be in the video. If you want to watch Frank's presentation again, you can click right to the beginning of his presentation and you'll skip the other stuff. You don't have to just watch all the way through. Sidra's question is, if we want a lower V-neck, can that be done?
I am working on that. I thought it would be a nice enhancement when somebody suggested it a week or so ago. Turns out the pattern was not easily modifiable to do that the way it is written in the software. So it's going to take me a while longer.
But it's something we can talk about.
I bet Suzanne could, I bet you could.
That's what we can
tell
talk
them
about.
to do that.
Exactly.
You instead of starting the sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, what Frank and I are going to do, this is good for people who've never knit a sweater before, all the way up to people who are very, very good, experienced sweater knitters who've altered their patterns many times. Anybody in between and both extremes will get something from this. So Sidra is probably a very good sweater knitter. And so what we can talk about with her is how to alter the pattern, the written pattern. We can start with the schematic, we can alter the schematic, and then take the information from the schematic and plug it into the written pattern so she can alter it after it's been spit out to allow for a deeper neckline. That might not apply to everybody, so some people, that might be too much information for them. They can skip over that. But there may be some people who are very interested in those minute details, and they would probably really enjoy that. So there's going to be something for everybody. So then it opens the doors for these people. But yes, we can do this, but it's going to take finessing and some math and things. Barbara Kalsa says, will we be able to adjust the pattern to make a shallow boat neck? Yes, that can be done. But again, it's going to be working with the schematic, changing the schematic, and then taking those changes and moving them into the written words of the pattern, but it can be done. 37 Vega Lyra question, would a boat neck sweater be possible with Franco's pattern? Yes, because you would just remove the front neck shaping. So it would be like a wide, shallow crew neck.
Yes.
That's easily done. So you would put your back neck width in as wide as you want your boat neck to be. But then you're not going to do any of the shaping on the front. Whereas,
You'll have to lie to the program and say your neck is 20 inches around instead of
yes, so
13.
you would want the diameter from your circumference. You would take your circumference, figure out what your diameter is for that circumference.
You may have to do that
The
experimentally.
opposite. We'd need the
No,
circumference and then figure out the diameter, enter the diameter. Yes, but we can
yeah.
talk about that because you don't have to put these final numbers in yet. What I would do is go ahead, do all the things that Frank showed how to do at the beginning of this. Get signed on to his platform. Get your numbers put in. Put your gauge swatch in. That's a fake gauge swatch. Just a ballpark with the yarn you want to use. Then it gives you an idea about how much yarn you're going to need. Then we'll be talking about swatching, so you don't even have to swatch yet. I'm assuming everybody's still working on their iTag Sis, which I started my front. This is the front. Here's the back. The back's not done, but I got a lot of it done, so I'm gonna stop at the underarms on both the front and the back, and then I'm gonna work the underarms together. But other people are doing that too. But as I've always said before, when I'm working on my current project and I'm in the flow of it, what my brain's thinking about is, what am I gonna knit next? What's next? Because I don't like that gap between one project and the next project. I like to have this project done, I can get started right on my next project. Otherwise, I have a little bit of insanity going on there, you know? And so while I'm knitting this project, in my mind, I'm thinking about the next project and I swatch for it. So this is a good time, even though you're already knitting a sweater, it's a good time to swatch for the next sweater. And then you can block your swatches. They can be relaxing. You can be manipulating them and playing with them so that when you go to actually measure the gauge, it's going to be accurate. And then we can start the next sweater. So that's the big picture of what's going to be like. Okay? So here's 37 Vega. Oh, she asked about the boat neck. Yes, we can do that. Let's see. Ronald says, question, hi Suzanne and Frank, how will fit the sweater when the bust is bigger if only the upper bust is measured? Well, that's what we're going to talk about in after you get your measurements and get your ballpark schematic and everything, and after you print out your pattern, then we'll talk about adjusting for bust size. And that can be done with short row shaping. And the short row shaping not only adds length because your bust comes out, and adds length to the front, but it also does add some depth, okay? Also, you can use this for abdomen shaping. Some people have a bigger abdomen and they need to have some abdomen shaping in the front of their sweater. We can use short rows for that too, okay? Diana Danko, do you think a corrugated pattern could be done on the front and a plain color in the back and still worked top down? So in the plain, a corrugated pattern in the front, are you talking about two colored corrugated ribbing? I'm not sure what you mean by corrugated. Oh,
I'm glad you said that because I was baffled by that too.
yeah, Diana says, I am thinking to make an opening like the sweater Frank is wearing now. But you want a corrugated pattern in the front. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Do you mean where the button tab is to make corrugated ribbing there? You could certainly do that. You could make any kind of ribbing you want. Refine your question a little bit, Diana, and ask it again, okay?
By the way, the Henley pattern does the simplest type of button band that I could think of, which is basically stockinette with a couple of ridges on the sides.
Very
And
cute. It's adorable.
I thank you.
I liked
Um,
it.
so that's what the pattern will describe, but it obviously that is the most modifiable thing on the Henley sweater. Use a different kind of button band, whatever you like.
Exactly. Oh, yes. So she's saying, yes, two color corrugated ribbing. Yes, you could do that on the button band. We can talk about that. That's positive. Absolutely. It'd be really pretty. Any other questions? I have a couple people. Frank, I am, you can stay on here. I'm going to ask a couple more, answer a couple more questions from my Ravelry page.
Why, sure.
So let's see. We have this one here. This is so cool. This is from Naughty Yarn Lady. And remember last week she showed us this picture of this same piece where she had the cable sections and in between she had moss stitch. And she had about half this distance done. And the moss stitch section was very short compared to the cable sections. And I had suggested that she add some short rows in the moss stitch. Well, she has, and look at it. Isn't this awesome? She's very happy with it. So now she did the calculations that she needed. She did not rip out what she had, but she figured out how many short rows she needed to add in here for the total length for it to be right. And now it's looking really good. Excellent. And thank you for coming back and showing the difference. This is Hasser Punto for iTag yoke. Where do you typically place the beginning of round marker on a knitted in the round top-down yoke sweater? I will be adding short rows to raise the back neck, and I was wondering whether these should or shouldn't cross the beginning of the round. You can place the beginning of round marker wherever you want. A lot of people will put it at the front or back of one of the shoulders. For a yoke, you could put it at the top of where a shoulder is going to be. You could put it in the center back. You could put it in the center front, anywhere you want, just as long as you know that that's what you're marking. If you put it at the top of a shoulder or in the back, of course, when you make your short rows, it's going to be crossing over the beginning of the round marker. She has another question. I'm planning my iTag yoke sweater, which will have increases in the 3 suggested concentric circles. I've been looking in the Japanese Knitting Stitch Bible for a suitable stitch pattern for the outer yoke circle. You've shown us how to merge one of these patterns into a rib. Would you be able to explain how you might place a stitch pattern between stockinette? I'm not sure what type of pattern is suited to this or how you might plan the entry and exit to and from the stitch pattern. I've been over at the beach all week, so I did not happen to bring my Japanese stitch Bible books over with me, but this is something I can address next week, and I can actually show you how I can merge one pattern, one stitch pattern that has one multiple number like 18 stitches and another one into a different set of numbers where the yoke has increased. I can show you that next week, okay? So come back next week and I'll be ready. And then HD Joy says, is there a trick to stop the ribbing hem from flipping up? It blocks out some, but never really lays flat. Personally, I've never had that problem. I know some people do have that problem. It depends on what you're using for the ribbing, I would suppose. If you're doing knit 2, purl 2 ribbing, maybe in the last row of the ribbing, you might do, knit 3, purl 1, knit 3, purl 1 around or something like that to try to make a transition between your ribbing to the stockinette. Frank, do you have answers for that kind of problem? Where ribbing flips up? My ribbing doesn't ever flip up, so I don't know.
Uh, I don't see that problem either. Ribbing it flips up at the end of the ribbon.
Yeah, I'm assuming when you say the HD Joyce, I'm assuming when you say ribbing that you're talking about either knit 1, purl 1 ribbing, knit 2, purl 2 ribbing, or something like that, versus an edging. An edging could be garter stitch, an edging could be seed stitch. I have seen garter stitch and seed stitch flip up, I've never had a problem with ribbing flipping up. Maybe this would be a good one for you to show us a picture in that on the Ravelry group. Those are all the questions from Ravelry. Let's see if we have any more over here. Whoops. There we go. Here, this is from 37 Vega Lear. It says, question, it looks like the sweater Frank is wearing has a pattern. Would Frank be able to show us his sweater? Is there a stitch pattern on it, Frank? Oh, there it is. Oh my goodness, isn't that beautiful? It's like a old shawl. The yes, the shell. What do you call that stitch pattern?
This is the, oh, what do they call it? Fan, and it's not a cable. It's usually a lace pattern that is, and I can't think its name right now, but it's very common. It usually has holes in it along here, so it's like fans, and I think these are called fans, and it's a fan and
feather and fan,
something like that. Something in fan, and I don't do lace in sweaters. I just don't think that would be very popular, and so I decided I liked the ripple effect that this pattern naturally has. So I decided, what would happen if you closed up the increases? You didn't do yarn overs, but you did something else. And I think what I did was make ones. It's really hard to tell because they're so buried in there.
It's very nice. So here's a really good, interesting question. Oh, and there's a hello from Hannah P. Hello from Washington, D.C., also known as Cicada Central right now, because they must have all those insects there. Sue McVicker, question. Frank, if I want to do a pattern on the front, i.e. all over lace, and the back in stockinette, which gauge would you use for the input? Just play and check schematic for end measurements?
No, that's a pretty difficult question. Maybe we should talk about that, Suzanne. The way I would approach it is, if the lace pattern is quite different than the stockinette, I would probably put in the stockinette measurements for the swatch measurements. And then when I'm knitting the front, I would adjust the number of stitches that I, perhaps would it be looser or tighter? I don't know which, but I would either put increases or decreases right along the front edge of this seam, and to change the number of stitches on the front. What do you think, Suzanne? Would that be a reasonable?
And it might not be an ideal situation for this type of construction, because the lace might have not only a different stitch gauge, but a different row gauge.
Ah, yes.
And so if
row gauge is important on my sweater.
Yeah, it just might not be ideal for this type of sweater construction. That might be more suited to a pieced sweater rather than an in the round sweater. Yeah. You'd have to do swatches, Sue. You'd have to do swatches and see what your stitch and your row gauge are. And everybody guessed that it was feather and fan or old shell.
Oh, good. Thank you for telling me what the pattern is that I knitted. My memory is like that. It's very selective.
Okay. So we've been on here for an hour, which is about our usual time. We're going to call it a day. Excuse me. Frank and I'll be back here again next week, and we'll, excuse me, continue on. So be sure, invite your friends, share the video with other people, tell people about Frank's website. If you have anybody wants to join in on the knit along, now's a good time.
Please do. I completely depend on word of mouth spreading the news about the
Exactly.
website.
Frank's kind of like Tesla. Tesla does zero advertising. And look how popular they are. So Frank doesn't do any advertising, and we might want to make him as popular as Tesla's, okay?
That's great.
That would be very cool. Word of mouth by knitters. Happy customers.
Yes, that's what I depend on.
Okay. Oh, let me do the first bind off thing. Sherry Cornick's question. Let me get my knitting needle out. But the last bind off, it's the last bind off stitch. So let me get some stitches on here so I can bind them off. And I'll switch to my hands when I get ready to do that. And you guys think about the questions you want to ask next week. If you want to ask them in advance in my Ravelry group, there'll be a thread. Dolise will make a thread there in the Ravelry group where you can put your questions in advance. I'm still going to be out of town all next week, so I don't have any of my books with me. So if it's something that needs me to use one of my reference books, that's hard for me to do because I don't have them. So let me do some bind off stitches and get to the last stitch. Okay, let me switch to my hands. Okay, I've got 2 stitches remaining to bind off. There's 2 ways you can do this. One is you can bind off this last stitch and then pull the yarn through. Pull this loop through. And we'll do that in a minute because if I do that one first, I won't be able to do the second one the same. What I do is I pull that loop up, and I've got to break the yarn here. I don't have my scissors. Okay, so I broke my yarn. So I pull that loop up, I open it to the orientation so that it's not twisted. I don't do it like this where it's twisted. I open it and I pull the strand through. And when I do this, all of this, I'm pulling to the side. I never pull up because if you pull up, it makes that last enlarged bind off stitch bigger. So I pull this all to the side. Now it's finished off and I don't have a big enlarged last bind off. So that's how I do it. What Sherry's asking is why you can't just do this without pulling this through, but instead just pull this loop through like this. You can, but what this is going to want to do is come up like this. And do you see how it's going to pull over like that? Because there's nothing fastening it down. It looks good when it's in position like this, but if there's any pulling on here, it comes out of position very easily and gets distorted. So I think it looks better if you have the strand going through as I did before with it coming up like this and pulling, and then that secures it down and it will not come up. Now, if you do it this way, the second method, and you weave in the end immediately, so there's no chance for it to get pulled, then you're safe. Does that answer that? Okay, so we're going to let you go. Let me go back to me and Frank here. We're going to let you go.
Can I put in the link to my Zoom meeting that occurs in 20 minutes?
Yes, put a link into your Zoom meeting. Frank's Zoom is at 2:30. It's always, it gives you a break. You can get something to eat, a snack, or get a glass of water or something between my live stream and his Zoom. His Zoom is live every week right after my live stream. He's going to put a link into that. What is the link? Oh, there it is.
It's franco.com/weekly_Zoom_meeting.
Okay.
You just
you
click
can also
that and
find
it takes
that
you to Zoom and you can join the meeting. It's a very informal meeting together. It's not me teaching. It's all of us together working on sweaters. And if people have questions, they can ask
And there's
questions.
people from all over the world, just like in this group. It's
That's right.
friendly, it's fun. What better way to spend your Saturday afternoon, you know?
Thank you.
It's
It's
always,
a much smaller group, I might add.
it's okay. You get to know each other that way.
Yes, we do.
Okay, we're going to see you next week, okay?
Okay.
Talk to you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone.